There's a lot of talk about Amazon. Obviously, we heard in Bessemer, Alabama, they were trying to do the Amazon Union. There was some hanky-panky. They might even have another election there due to that. Obviously, there's another Amazon Union trying to form in New York, too. And
Right.
that's still ongoing right now. With that said, Jeff Bezos is him and Elon Musk between the day is he's one of the richest men in the world.
Yep.
If he actually unionized and let these people get the union, he would be viewed as a hero toward everybody in the United States. Why won't he just give up a tiny bit of power to the workers and let them make a good wage and have a little bit of benefits? And like I said, and maybe you would disagree with this, but I personally think he'd be viewed as a hero around the country. And he would, we saw Trump run for president. I hope this doesn't happen, but we could see Bezos run for president on something like that. Just like you said, as far as the right is taking over the working party and as the working party in this country, Bezos could run on with that as being a union guy for the Amazon workers, which is a huge, large employer in this country.
Okay, let me respond on 2 or 3 levels. First of all, Americans should understand that in Europe, which is a major area for the Amazon Corporation where it functions, in most European countries, the power of unions and the power of socialist, leftist, communist parties is much, much greater than in the United States. And one of the results of that greater power of the working class is that they already have unions. In other words, Amazon doesn't have unions here, but it has long accommodated unions over there. And those unions have struck. Those unions have had job actions. Amazon has a rocky history, and it has had to come to terms. And many of the conditions of workers over there who work for Amazon are better than what they are here. Number one. Number two, when I keep hammering at the idea that our problem is a system, I'm going to do it now in terms of answering your question. For Jeffrey Bezos to reverse gears the way you suggest would require him to go against the way he has lived his life from the beginning. As a young person growing up in this country, he was told, if you're richer, it's better than if you aren't. And nobody asks you when you go into the store where you got the money to buy that fancy car. They only want to know, do you have enough to pay for the car? Whether you stole it, whether you snitched it off your dying grandmother, whether you swindled people, the storekeeper doesn't want to know, will not ask. Do you got it? You get the car. Do you not got it? You don't get the car. That's the way the system works. If he went to college, his professors talked like that. They thought it was reasonable that profit is the bottom line, that a business is evaluated whether or not it's profitable. How many employees does it have? How big are its sales revenue? For him, success was getting bigger. No one ever said to him, think about maybe another way of running your life. Didn't happen to him. I've taught in business schools. Nobody does that. So the problem is, if the system is geared up like that, you're going to have the vast majority of people act, talk, and look like Jeffrey Bezos. They either are that or they're dreaming of becoming that. I'm going to do that. That's the mentality of what success means. If you organize life differently, you wouldn't have that. If you look at, I'll give you an example. If you look at the indigenous people who were here in this country before the Europeans came, They didn't operate like that. One Indian chief didn't have 47 teepees. He didn't. He made do with one because that was the way the tribe worked. There's nothing necessary about this. And future generations, historians, are going to look back and they're going to say, because everyone watching this program knows what I'm about to say. We watched a few weeks ago as Elon Musk and Jeffrey Bezos and Richard Branson and a few others spent many millions of dollars building rocket ships to put their fat rear ends in for a few minutes and get a picture in the newspaper. That money could have put homeless people into a home. It could have improved the education for people who therefore could have had a productive life, and on and on. And there is no excuse for this. I'm an economist. I've done the math. I've showed people, if you took the 700 billionaires that we have in the United States, and that's all we have, 700. If you took and cut their wealth in half, here's the joke. It would free up, get ready, trillions of dollars for our social problems. And those 700 people, with only half the billions they had before, would still be the 700 richest people in the United States. There is no excuse, no morality that I know of, not Christian, not Jewish, not Muslim, justifies this kind of inequality. And in the end, it's going to swallow up American capitalism because the mass of people at some point are going to say, enough. We're not going to allow this another minute.
I think we're almost there as far as that goes. I want to go into the second audience question out of 5. I want to talk about the real estate issue. That's been a huge issue on everybody's mind, and I got quite a few questions about this, so I'm going to firm it into one. Do you see a real estate crash? Obviously, the prices are extremely high. I'm personally worried, and I'd love for you to touch on this too, about places like BlackRock that are buying up a lot of these vacant houses. And, people eventually will probably have to move into this. BlackRock wants a rent society so that they can run all these houses like a business. Are you worried about all this happening? I know it's already happening in general as far as BlackRock, but it could get worse.
Yes, I think what you're seeing is a major change in the American capitalist system. And because we don't have the kind of press we ought to, there isn't a national debate about this. But let me give you some of the symptoms of it. 1979, the number of jobs in manufacturing in the United States peaked. We had about 20 million jobs, non-supervisory, working in manufacturing. That's where our unions were the strongest. That's where the wages were the highest. That's where the job security was the greatest, okay? We have increased manufacturing production since then, but the number of jobs, non-supervisory jobs in manufacturing is today $8.5 million as I talk to you. In other words, half the manufacturing jobs are gone. Every president since 1979, that means I'm starting with Ronald Reagan, every president from Reagan down has promised to bring back manufacturing jobs. And every single president did not deliver on that promise. Why? Because manufacturing is now done elsewhere in the world, in China above all, but in India, in Brazil, all over the world. Okay, Americans don't have those kind of jobs, and with the disappearance of those jobs, we also had a wave of technical change. The computer, then the robot, and now artificial intelligence. The technology got rid of millions more jobs, and the export of production to other countries, that's it, we're done. What does that mean? It means a growing population does not have jobs making things. The jobs that they have are doing services for other people. And that's what is going on. And it's so profitable for the businesses to move production to China that they keep doing it. Even when the United States and China are at each other, the profit drive dominates all that. And they continue to automate, to robotize, to artificial intelligence, all of it. So there's no going back. We are stuck with a small group of people becoming very, very wealthy. And here comes the punchline. The rest of us are becoming servants. We do the shopping. We help you keep fit in the fitness center. We wash your car. We clean your house. That's what we do for each other. That's what we do. And those jobs are interchangeable. They're not very skilled. You don't have much power over your boss. If you do make a noise, they bring immigrants in who are desperate and willing to work for a lot less. You know the story. Okay, so under these circumstances, what's happening is a changing real estate market, because mass individual housing was only possible for people who earned enough money to be able to carry a mortgage, to borrow enough to have to pay the monthly mortgage. You had to have a job. You better have a job that's secure, because if you miss a couple of those mortgage payments, the lender can come and take it away. We all know this kind of story. We can't afford that anymore. The bottom line is, if you want a housing system, you got to give working people enough money to buy the house, or you got to bring the price of the house down to where working people can afford it. We are not doing that in the United States. That's why we have homeless. And now to answer your question, people cannot have their own home anymore. So that's what BlackRock is doing. It's buying up the houses, often saying to the people in the house who used to own it, you can't make the mortgage payments. We're going to take your house, but you can stay here and pay us rent and stay in your house. But that monthly money, that's gone. As soon as you pay us, we take it. You're not building equity, we are. And that's a recognition that Americans cannot afford what they thought was their birthright, namely to become one day a homeowner. What Americans are becoming now is ex-homeowners. And by the way you handle that is, if they can't afford the rent, you're going to do what poor people have always done. An apartment for 4 becomes an apartment for 6. Yeah. And the apartment for 6 later becomes an apartment for 8. And your cousin Harry and your Aunt Matilda, and what are you going to do? They've lost their apartment. They don't have a job. Do you want to kick them on the street? Or is there the extra bedroom that you can convert in? That's what we're doing. And that's only because we are allowing a tiny number of people to become ridiculously wealthy, and the rest of us doing what I just described.
I know you just talked about the wealthy on Economic Update. Definitely check that out on your YouTube channel. You just did a segment on that. So are you saying that the American dream is dead then? Then Trump was right on that.
Absolutely. Okay. It wasn't that so much that he was right. It's been dying steadily for 30 years. It's not so much dying. Think of it a different metaphor. It's slipping further and further out of reach. That's the problem. That's our real problem. And Americans can't afford it, and they're making accommodations, whether it's in the diet that they're having, whether it's in not going to see the doctor the way they ought to early on, whether it's doubling up in the apartment. Look, we have a record this year. More young people are living with their parents longer than they have for many years. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Let's end with these last two questions quickly. 2022 is just about here. Can you give the viewers a little bit of an economic outlook for 2022?
I think it's going to be a year of very big decisions in people's individual lives, in our collective life as a society and as a country. Put it this way, we have, as folks like to say, we have dealt with our social problems in this country like so many of those cans that you kick down the road. Yeah. We haven't dealt with them hoping that somehow they would solve themselves, or maybe they just go away. That doesn't happen. And they've now come back to haunt us. We don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are likely to be. I can't tell you how many more Americans will have to go to the hospital or visit a doctor or put a burden on the Medicare or the Medicaid.
And they shut down a lot of those hospitals in general.
That's right. They've been closing. You know, we are facing, look, many of us have been shocked by the return of a virulent white supremacy confronting, you know, a population that is becoming more black and brown with every week. I mean, these are problems that are building like steam underneath the pavement. And eventually, you know, the manhole is going to blow because you can't box all these in. And let me mention a couple of other things I think will be high on the agenda. Americans have not yet understood that there's another big change now from anything that we've had in the last century. This last century has been the American century. Coming out of World War I, the United States was the big, successful capitalist country. The potential competitors, Britain, our original colonial master, Germany, Japan, they couldn't match what was done in this country. And those who tried in World War II, they were destroyed. So for most of the last century, the United States has had no economic competitor. Whatever you thought about the Soviet Union, an economic competitor, it never was. But we have one now, and it isn't going away, and that's China. And you can provoke China, you can send your warships 10,000 miles into their water, you can fight with them about an island, Taiwan, just off their coast, or Hong Kong, which isn't even off the coast, part of their society and always was. But you can't win these things. The country has 4 times the population the United States does. It has demonstrated it can do everything technologically this country can, as well or better. You've got a real competitor here. And how that plays out, that's everybody's guess. But that's going to be a big player. And I think the surprise will be, perhaps, the return of the power of Europe. Americans don't understand Europe either. Americans live in that American century. We are the king of the hill. We're the best country. When I tell people about what the conditions of working class folks are in, for example, France or Germany, my American audiences look at me, their mouths fall open, they stare. I tell them, for example, that once you graduate high school or college in France and you take your first job, you are, by law, a law fought for and passed by the socialists and communists in France. You must be given 5 weeks of paid vacation by your employer from the get-go, from day one, no exemptions. No Americans have that. You get many months of maternity and paternity leave mandated by the law. Americans have none of it. the cost to get an undergraduate or graduate education in the German universities, which are among the best in the world and an easy match for anything in America. I've been there. The tuition at a German university, public university, which is where most people go, zero. The educational fees to go there, zero. People who go to university are considered doing something to develop their contributions to society, and they are paid for the same way you pay for a public park or a highway. It's a collective expense. You have to take care of your room and board, which you would have had to do anyway, but there's no Americans have they don't have a generation of people with debts up to here to get a college degree that isn't worth much anymore. They don't have any of that. America isn't the king of the hill anymore. America has to understand it's slipping, and badly. And I think that's going to be a big motif in the year 2022.
So as we end with this last question, can you give the Gen Z crowd and the millennials hope? You know, we talk about AI and how that's taken jobs in America. You discussed that just a couple of minutes ago. Obviously, climate change is a problem. We got COVID. We're worried about good paying jobs in general, student debt, medical debt, healthcare, affordable housing. There's so many problems for the millennials and the Gen Z to worry about. What is the hope that you'd like to leave the crowd that's listening as far as these age groups?
The hope comes from my own personal experience. So let me end with that.
Sure.
I have been a critic of capitalism most of my adult life. I have tried to explain to people that alongside the achievements of capitalism, there are terrible failures and flaws. And to get across the idea that just as human beings lived under slavery for a long time and finally ended that because they thought they could do better, and the serfs did that in feudalism, the working class can and will do that for capitalism too. The world doesn't stop. Capitalism isn't the end. And here's my hope for the generation you're talking about. My audience now is larger in size and more enthusiastic in its response to what I'm saying than has ever been the case in my life. And I got to tell you that those problems are teaching this new generation to think critically in a way that my generation was afraid to do. So my hope is in the young people, those who could see that Bernie was a better direction than any of the others, there is a development of consciousness which has the power to bring a happy ending to what might otherwise be a tragic story.
Professor Richard Wolff, thanks so much for your time. Again, rdwolff.com, and on YouTube, Democracy at Work. Definitely check him out, show Economic Update. Professor Wolff, thanks so much.
And thank you, Fire Breathing Bob, because I enjoy breathing some fire with you every time we talk.
Thank you, Professor Wolff. A quick question before we hang up. Why did Biden stick with Jerome Powell, do you feel like?
I think the reason was that he was in such trouble with the corporate community. They were horrified that he had proposed paying for the Build Back Better by raising taxes on them, even though they weren't going to be raised back to what they were when Trump reduced them. But they were so angry that he realized that their support for the Democratic establishment was in jeopardy. He had to give them something so they could understand, no, I'm not your enemy. You can rely on me. I won't allow Bernie or those people to do anything. It was a way to demonstrate I'm your friend. Very sad, very sad.
It's terrible. There was very qualified people. Biden had a chance, and then I'll shut up and let you go. Biden had a chance to do a lot of good things, and he came in, the Build Back Better, it wasn't the best thing, but at least it was a start. And they just kept dropping. And like I said, he's no FDI. He's no LBJ. LBJ would have got those guys by the throat. He used to do that in the Senate and take that cinema and Manchin and got them by the throat and said, you do that. I don't even know what happened to Bernie. Bernie, during the primary, said that he was going to go to West Virginia and places and stump for this, if he was president. I know he's not president, but he's not even doing that either. None of the progressives are doing anything to push this bill. They just sat, they let Nancy Pelosi be the speaker. They didn't push back on that. They didn't push back on Build Back Better, really. They just let it pass. And now it might not even get passed. And if it gets passed, like we said, it's crumbs.
Yeah, it's too little and it's too late.
All right. Professor Wolff, hey, thanks so much. Good talking to you as always. Hey, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year if we don't talk.
You too.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye now.